This episode of the Oh No 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 podcast is sponsored by Dynamic Industrial Services, the rope access specialists. The roof of the South Stand at Starch Park is some 19 metres above the pitch, the same height as 11 Aidan Connolly's. But as we all know, there's only one Aidan Connolly, and so you'd be much better off with Dynamic Industrial Services. DIS specialise in working at height, offering a range of services including maintenance, inspection and repair. To find out more, visit dynamicindustrialservices.co.uk.
Well, almost time for another downbeat episode to review a Rovers defeat. Guess I'll just quickly check the Rovers website before I hit record and... Oh no! Oh no! Oh God! Well. Less than 24 hours after the first league game of the season, a 1-0 defeat at Airdrie, Raith Rovers sacked Iain Murray earlier today. Despite agreeing a 3.5-year contract extension in December, the Rovers board decided that Murray's 105th game in charge would be his last, citing results and performances that have fallen short of expectations. This is the Oh No 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 podcast. I am Duncan Cameron, and while this would normally be a discussion of yesterday's game, I don't think that's going to get much of a look in. But regardless, to help me process and heal, tonight I am joined by a full house. So first of all, I've got Blair Hopcroft. How are you, Blair?
In shock.
I think that might be
not buzzing.
A shared emotion, yeah. We've got Robbie Weir as well. How are you, Robbie?
Yeah, finally hit that emergency podcast button, and what a time for it to come. What a subject.
Right out of the blue. We've got Iain Latto too. How are you, Iain?
Yeah, delighted to be back. Had a couple of false starts over the kind of League Cup period and the friendlies of kind of things not lining up and not being able to get on, so glad to be back on.
Set for a big one. We've got Scott Fleming as well. How are you, Scott?
Very confused, but I think we'll obviously talk about everything in the next however long this takes.
Yeah, this podcast of indeterminate length. And we've got Callum Blythe as well. How are you, Callum?
It was a right laugh seeing how my prediction video that I put up Friday is within 48 hours just completely fucked. Just completely out of date. New record achieved. But yeah, here to talk about the elephants in the room.
Yes, definitely. So, we don't have an awful lot to go on this, to be fair. Not that will stop us going on for a great length. But just to sort of kick us off, I'm just going to quickly sort of read the statement the Rovers put on the website, because that's all we've got sort of in black and white to try and explain this situation. So it seems like the natural place to start. So this came out earlier today. Raith Rovers Football Club can confirm it has parted company with first-team manager Iain Murray. The board expresses its gratitude to Iain for his contributions since joining the club in May 2022. Despite finishing second last season, results and performances since the turn of the year have fallen short of expectations. The board has therefore decided to terminate the manager's contract. The process of appointing a new manager has begun. In the interim, Colin Cameron and John Pope will take care of first-team duties until a successor is appointed. So, as I say, not a huge amount to go on, but a few, even in that short statement, a few interesting points. But Iain, we'll start with you. Just big picture stuff first. Give me your overall reaction to today's news, please.
I think ultimately, quite similar to a lot of people, extremely surprised. I think it's come completely out of the blue. It's not often you see a first-team football manager sacked after one league game. I know that the statement is mentioned, results from the turn of the year, but ultimately we got to the playoff final and finished a really strong second. So, we never got out of the League Cup group. Whether or not that's been a target for the board and, we've not achieved that, and they're taking that into account, we don't really know. Can only assume that is the case. But overall, incredibly surprised, and I'm not going to lie, a wee bit disappointed to see him go. The board have had a lot of plaudits for being really progressive and being really transparent and things, and the way that we've been run since they've come in. And this just feels like a complete detachment from that. It feels quite knee-jerk and it feels quite reactionary. And I'm a wee bit vexed for Iain Murray because I think he deserved better than that. So, yeah, it's going to be a strange kind of interim period until we get someone new in.
Yeah, definitely. Scott, what was your immediate reaction as the news kind of broke earlier today?
Well, obviously, at first, I think people started questioning whether it was just somebody having a laugh because we'd lost another game to Airdrie. But when somebody then went, "Oh, it's actually been announced on Sports Sound," they went, "Well, it's actually happening," then because they wouldn't have just said that for the laugh at. So no, I was kind of pretty much on the same line as Iain, just really disappointed, to be honest, because this board have always been saying, look, we'll always try to involve the fans, whether it's after they've made a decision, but they're informing us stuff like that and telling us how they've got this 5-year plan and it's not going to be too reactive to things and stuff like that. I won't say they've gone backwards, but they've definitely put a big hole in a situation where folk are going to start questioning everything they do in the next few weeks, especially because see if we don't have somebody in charge for next Saturday, for instance, and nothing changes in terms of the players still don't really have a sort of identity that apparently has been lacking the last few games. Well, that's not Iain Murray's issue. That's a whole squad's issue. And Colin Callum and John Potter are still there. They were there under under Iain Murray as well. So again, it's not like we've completely gotten rid of everybody out the coaching staff. We've still kept the assistant manager and a coach who's been helping out as well. So that's also going to make it a little bit confusing. I just hope that the players, to be honest, don't get too distracted with this and it'll be tough. Like, it's not going to be easy, but I think they really need to kind of buy in together now to go, right, well, everyone's kind of now going to be against us. We really need to be together in this moment. But yeah, I would say overall, as I said in the intro, confused and pretty disappointed with how it's ended up.
Yeah. Blair, both Iain and Scott there have mentioned the board and the fact that this seems out of step almost. Do you agree with that? Do you think this is sort of uncharacteristic based on what we've come to learn of this board over the last year or so? Or do you think this is almost just a different angle from the same sort of mentality and the same way of working?
Yeah, I think for me, probably the latter. If I'm honest, I think they have been quite progressive in moving the club forward, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes and around Starks Park to try and progress the club on and make it a more professional outfit, changing the changing rooms and changing the atmosphere around the place and all of that kind of stuff. I think I would agree with what Scott and Iain are saying, particularly Scott there about the board they've been quite transparent and maybe not quite so now. But I think they need time. Like, I'm not sure they wanted to announce it today, is the first thing I would say. I mean, it leaked to Sports Sound. That's how we found out, was through Sports Sound. I don't think that was part of the plan. So I would imagine they wanted to kind of get their ducks in a row and then get the story out. But as is the nature with everything these days with agents and managers and all the rest of it, the story's broken. So I would imagine the story's gotten away for them a little bit quicker than what they hoped. And so I would hope that over the next week 10 days maybe, we do get a little bit more of an insight from the board, because I don't think the statement's enough. I think that's probably where, and I don't want to speak for the guys that have just spoken before me, but I think that's where I definitely agree. I don't think the statement's enough to just say that and we're all just going to accept it and move on. Although there is a bit of truth in the statement, I have to be honest, I was sat at half-time yesterday along at Airdrie, and I was like, how do we change this? How do we get out from this? Like it just, there's something. And I have to say, Murray's interview after the game was carbon copy what we'd said on the bus on the way back. Like, he absolutely nailed it on the head, but it kind of lands at his feet. Like, it's his squad and it's his team. There's no way anybody can look at that and say it's not his team. He's had more than enough time. There is something, he used the phrase, there's something missing. And he's right, there is. And I don't know what it is. I really don't know what it is, but yesterday was flat. Like, really, really flat. There was no, I don't know, like, no pizzazz. That's a really daft thing to say, but there was no sparkle about that team at all. It was just so run-of-the-mill. Like, so yeah, I mean, really, really shocked this morning. I've got to be honest, I was gutted. Because obviously I texted really quickly because I'd got a message of a former work colleague who I thought was on the wind-up. And I was like, boys, I'm hearing that Murray's been sacked. Like, surely no.
Genuinely, sorry to jump in. See, when you sent that, I was like, which Murray? I was like, who Murray? Like, Murray?
Yeah.
Who? It's like, is there a Murray who's at Stenhousemuir or something who I've forgotten about?
Aye.
Because it's like, this doesn't...
Never in a million years did I see this coming.
The timing, I think, is one of the huge things for me. Like,
yeah.
So, first of all, I mean, cards on the table, right? As things stand at the moment, I don't agree with the decision. There's no... I didn't particularly enjoy my day out yesterday. I didn't think we were very good. But at no point, even remotely, did it occur to me to think, we need to change the manager.
Yeah, same.
So the timing, I think, is one of the biggest things. To touch on Murray's interview a little bit, and I think we'll probably come back to it, because it was, particularly in light of what's happened, very interesting in a few different aspects of it. But talking about things like something seems to be missing or something's wrong, it sounded like the interview you would get from a manager who's a little bit downbeat, a little bit downtrodden, who's maybe not 1 in 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're in February, you lost 2, drew 1, lost another 2, and then you've just get narrowly beat 1-0 away. And you're like, I've been trying to fix this for 5 weeks. I don't know, the ball's not breaking. It was really bizarre for that to come after the first game of the season, first league game of the season. But the League Cup group,
far out of the League Cup as well.
The League Cup group though wasn't bad either. Like,
now, you described it perfectly on that show. It was level par. It's exactly what it was. It was level par.
Like, it was fine. And listen, you don't know how these things work. You could have had categorically a thing that says at the start of the year, right? You're being assessed against these benchmarks. Benchmark number 1, you must qualify from the League Cup group. And the manager maybe agreed to that, right? Fine. That could be part of it. But based on the evidence of our own eyes, based on what we watched, we never really hit full stride. But we won the 2 games against the teams worse than us. We get beat by the team better than us. And we drew with the teams at the same level as us. That, if you're the manager who was really, really under pressure at the end of last season, you could maybe look at that and go, look, performances haven't ticked up. But that's not the read to me. That's like right, okay, so performances the second half of last season, results in the second half of last season, didn't meet the highs of the first half of last season. But that's a different level from like sackable form.
Yeah.
I would have thought. And one other thing, just while I'm thinking about it, and then I'll let somebody else speak for a bit. I think this whole podcast might go like this a little bit. The thing that really gets me with it is, or the thing that I think might be like the reprieve, if I'm trying to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, you do see football clubs, and the Rovers have been guilty of it in the past, albeit with different boards, where you know the manager's going to get sacked. Like, he's gone
It's
beyond the
inevitable.
point of no return.
Gary Locke trudging along the trackside against Morton at home.
Grant
That's
Murray
like-
was another
yeah.
one. Like,
Yeah.
Grant Murray, you could just... there was never, for about 3 months, there was no way Grant Murray was going to turn it around to the point that everybody was like, I love Grant Murray again. Like, this is great. Would you like a new contract? It was a case of he was either going to stumble along until his contract expired, or we were going to lose 4 goals at home to Livingston, and that
Yeah.
would tip the balance.
Well,
And what you kind of want in that decision is to go to the boardroom and say, look, off the record, when did you realise that this guy was done? And they go, well,
Yeah.
3 months ago. So, right, well, you should have sacked him then. Now, conceivably, I think that... So as I say, to kind of devil's advocate a little bit, if you're the boardroom, you're the board, you're the chairman, the CEO, whatever it is, if you decide this isn't the manager for you, the time to act is as soon as possible. But with that said, I still don't think it's the right decision. And if it's the wrong decision, doing it quickly, there's no better. That's not really a tick in your column. Robbie, I don't have a question for you. Just again, give me general reaction, general thoughts up till now.
Sorry, I just saw a fluff piece from a journalist suggesting that John Hughes might return out of like 7 candidates, and I just told them,
Jesus.
please take Yogi out of that.
Return where? Maybe anywhere fucking near us. Much.
Inverness.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, of course, much like everyone else, absolutely shocked to see. And like you've alluded to there, Duncan, I think that you get to a point with some managers, and I would probably say for the last like 4 or 5 managers that we've had you look at, the likes of, for instance, John McGlynn. We had the Goodwillie debacle and sort of the end of that season where things just tailed off, and you kind of thought, right, this is the right time for us to go in our separate ways. You had Barry Smith, where it was 2-0 down against Airdrie, I think it was at half time, and people were calling for his head. And then the week after against Forfar, he doesn't get a signing sanctioned and he walks. But you kind of felt like his race had run because Arbroath were away at that point. John Hughes and, of course, Gary Locke were 2 that you sort of were like immediate, like, okay, those are out the door. Iain Murray does not fall into any of those categories at all. I feel that it was just very strange looking at the post-match interview where he's came out all guns blazing basically and sort of spoken about the things that he has. And I'd agree with Blair. I think that he does have an overriding point there. And a lot of people were after the game. I think there was a lot of questions being asked in terms of the setup at the club, in terms of how come we've got so many injuries? Why is our play style like this? Why are we creating so little? I think just before we came on air, we spoke about the last 3 games that we've had at Airdrie, all been within a goal of each other. Very flat performances, very little chances, if any chances, and it's just not been the case. But I think firstly I would just say I know that he's highly unlikely to get wind of this podcast, but Iain Murray, I think if he was to listen to it, I think that the overwhelming support would probably be sort of saying, like, look, thanks for the memories that he gave us over the last season, because he's had a lot of high moments. He did get us to a Challenge Cup in the first season that he was with us, and then the title race last season. And I think that he had a lot of credit in the bank, to be fair. But just the timing of it just seems very strange. To get to your first league game, give the guy a chance to sort of like build the most of a squad, and then you give him the bullet after a 1-0 loss to Airdrie when you've got quite a lot of injuries. Just seems very strange. But look, I think that in terms of the perspective from the club from the outside, while it is a strange situation that we find ourselves in, realistically, we should be the most attractive prospect outside of the top flight of Scottish football right now. And I don't think that we should shy away from saying that as a club, the appointment that comes up has got to be right. It's a lot easier to make a poor appointment than it is a good one. And that, yeah, we've got everything at the moment that managers should look at us and say, look, Raith Rovers are a club that are on the up. They've clearly got a fair amount of backing in there. They've got a very, very good squad. So we should be taking our time with this one to get it right without sort of hurrying, without sort of making rash appointments. And it was interesting that in their statement they allude to, like, I know that they say that the results haven't been good, but the entertainment factor, like, we need to be appointing a manager that's not just going to be a Dougie Imrie, brutally efficient, long ball football. Like, we want to watch a decent game of football. Like, we shouldn't be going in for someone that's just going to be grinding out these results or performances, because then you would ask the question, well, what's been the point in sacking Iain Murray if you're going to go for that?
Yeah, and again, I keep coming back to the same question. And Callum, I'm going to ask you, maybe you'll have the answer. I suppose it's kind of it's a two-part question, and I don't know if you'll have the answer to either of them, but give me your thoughts on it anyway. If this is on the cards, why would you do it now as opposed to in the summer? Like, what can possibly have changed between full-time in Dingwall in the playoffs and full-time at Airdrie that the manager ends up being sacked? So, I don't know why I'm asking you to speak for the club on that, but like, any theories? Why do you think Iain Murray's been sacked, Callum?
As the statement said, it was to do with performances and results since the turn of the year, which, yes, there had been a downfall, and I think I'd seen something like right towards the end of last season where basically, if the season had started after that win at Tannadice, we would have been fourth, I think it was, and it would have been Airdrie and Dundee United gunning out for the title. But it's like, we finished comfortably second. We made the playoff final. We, as you were saying, performed about, like, League Cup was fine. And it's like, if you were having these concerns, again, it's like, why after the first league game of the season? Because it's like, at this point now, it's like you've given Murray June and July to build a squad. So it's like, if you were going to if you had concerns about this, you either sack him before the summer, bring someone in to then build their own squad over the summer, and then that gives him the time to start a play, or you give him, if you are going to let him build a squad, like what the board have done, you give him about October, November time, because that's usually when you do start to see managers go, because then it's like you've been given, the first quarter of a season. And so it's just like, you've done it way, way too soon, and also way, way too late. It's like they've hit like the perfect middle ground of like when to not do it, because if someone's going to come in now, they've got 3 weeks of the transfer window, and I understand it's like they don't do the transfers because it's John Potter, but it's
that's the thing. I was just going to say that this isn't Murray's squad in that sense.
That's what makes it weird. So it has to be someone who plays like Murray.
Well,
if they're going to do the squad.
That's the thing. No, under this model, I don't think that's the case at all. I think, for me to go back to the question Duncan's just asked, I think what's changed is the squad has been upgraded a bit and the performances haven't changed. So the board are looking at it and going, now's the time. New manager comes in with a couple of ideas. He might have one or two players he wants to add to it, and we discuss those, and we've still got a chance to bring them in. But ultimately, under the model that they're currently working, they build the squad as a unit. So Murray, Potter, Cameron, I would imagine Barrowman has a bit of say in it as well. Like, that whole unit comes together to build the squad, and Murray's job is to get a tune out of them. They just need to find somebody else who can play that fiddle.
Yeah, a couple of things I would add to that. I wrote down exactly the same thing. Where just when Callum was talking there, it's actually it's John Potter who's building the squad. But even at that, I don't think it's a particularly. It's not like an ideology-driven signing program. It's not like
Barcelona 2010, where it's like Must use
not
the
the
youth.
issue?
Exactly. Like, there's no manager's going to come in and be like, what the hell am I supposed to do with Lewis Stevenson and Paul Hanlon? Like,
No.
Yeah.
They've brought in really solid championship players, basically. And actually, Robbie, you mentioned Barry Smith a minute ago, and the fact that sort of a signing wasn't sanctioned and he walked, and then John McGlynn came back, and suddenly there was transfer money again. And while I don't think, based on obviously what we just said about the fact it's Potter who's kind of doing the squad building, I don't think they're kind of holding anything back from Ian Murray or anything like that. I don't think it's one into that kind of conspiratorial element of it.
See, for me, just to come back in just quickly here, what I would say is I think that all the things suggest towards sort of it being more the fact that we've kept Potter and Cameron in terms of exactly where they are, and that they'll be picking up the reins for now until we appoint a new manager. It would really suggest that it has been a flashpoint rather than a thought out longer term decision. As to, like, I know the statement says about results and performances, but also as well the fact that you're keeping the majority of the system in place would suggest that it's maybe more towards a flashpoint, which can happen. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind, I would say, as well.
I also want to say about Blair, I think you mentioned it about the statement being a bit rushed because obviously it got leaked on Sports Scene. It's like, normally when the Rovers make one of these announcements, whether it's a player coming in or like teasing anything or whatever, it's usually at like on the dot for the hour or whatever. The announcement that the club made was 12:39, which is a bit off because you'd expect them to do it like on the hour at some point. This is probably going to be done today, announced tomorrow, possibly.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
But obviously it's been leaked, so they've had to like hastily put something up because, as you were saying, it's like they're usually like really good, really transparent about it, about these sort of things. So they would have possibly had something planned, but they had to just get something out there ASAP.
I think if you're wanting transparency, you would hope that there's going to be an interview at some point with Andrew Barrowman that will sort of outline sort of maybe what they're looking for, and to sort of justify, because there's a lot of questions, and I know that, like, let's be honest, as fans, you never get the full technical details.
No.
Like, people will look and see Ian Murray on a 3-year deal, and we've canned him, but we don't know whether it was like a rolling contract, for instance. It might be that we're only paying up till the end of the season because it has been a rolling contract, and that's been what's been agreed by both parties. Ian Murray might have seen that as an opportunity to move forward. If an opportunity came in the summer, for instance, then he could move on without too much hassle. Yeah, well, it might be the case. But yeah, there's very little that we know at the moment. As Duncan said
And
before, it is speculation.
To be fair as well, I don't think we're going to get as much as we would like on the
never going to get
motivation and the rationale. And I think in large part for as much reason as any is when managers get sacked, there's either formally or informally, there's kind of NDA type agreements in place for the simple reason that if the club come out and go, oh, we sacked him because he's terrible, he's never at training, he's drinking on the job, all this stuff, that really harms the guy's employment possibilities. And
you'll see and at the same time, situation.
If the manager comes out and goes, yeah, they sacked me, but I've had no money to work with, like, the place is a disgrace, it doesn't work for anybody. So they come to an agreement, they go, right, you've been sacked, but by the way, look, we're going to agree that nobody discusses this for 2 years. Yeah. And so that's really going to limit. So even if Andrew Barrowman does do an interview, you're not going to get the rationale as it actually is, because there's going to be elements on that. As I say, I want to come back to some of the wording specifically in the statement as well, but just to pick up on some of the stuff that Robbie was saying there. Iain, I'm going to put you on the spot, ask you a direct question. Do you think there's somebody lined up already?
It's difficult. It's really difficult because of the nature of our setup, in that we have a first team coach and we've got guys who do the recruitment, and it's all a kind of huge working process. That probably limits the managers that are in our pool if we're going to keep that structure. So to just sack someone off the bat and then be like, right, Iain, sorry mate, we've come to the end of the road and you're out. Who's next? That feels like something this board wouldn't do, because they've always got a long-term vision of where they want the club to be going, to be travelling to. So to answer your question in a word, yes, I think that they've probably made inroads with someone who they already know will be happy to work in our structure, because I just don't think the alternative to that is something that they would consider.
Yes, that's the feeling I get as well.
Based
on nothing,
wording.
but
There
just
was some wording in the statement where it was like the club were in the process of appointing, not like searching for someone, appointing. So maybe they do have, like they'll obviously have, maybe they've got like contingency plans. So it's like they'll probably have like people who are like, right, these are like the hierarchy of who we want if we want to replace Murray, and it'll be like bam, in you come within a week. Might have someone in for this week, but we definitely have someone within before these after party tickets here, isn't it? Anyway, we'll have someone in before that.
I think we're definitely at risk of overanalyzing a 90-word statement that we already acknowledge was probably rushed out. But at the same time, not going to let it stop us. Because, as we said at the beginning, this is all we've got to go on. And that, I mean, that part less so, to be fair, the kind of the process of appointing a new manager has begun. I think that's neither here nor there. It does, if you want to kind of interpret it literally, it does suggest that things are kind of further down the road than, certainly than like we are now inviting prospective candidates to send CVs or whatever. But the other part of it that, again, it just speaks to the kind of shock nature of it and the unusual nature of it, given the way that this board operates, is the line before that is just quite simply the board has therefore decided to terminate the manager's contract, right? And I don't doubt that's true. And I don't doubt that's true 90% of the time a manager leaves a football club these days. But it's
usually more vague, isn't it?
Yeah, you're sort of well-run, modern football clubs, which this board has appeared to be, and all the dealings up till now, similar to the last point I made about the NDA and stuff. You go, look, it's not going to do you any favours if we tell everybody that we've sacked you. So how about we put it down as, we've told you to bugger off and you've mutually agreed that. Like that, so it goes through, like you've mutually agreed that now is the right time, and everybody kind of saves a little bit of face. It doesn't actually change anything, but again, it's that. Like,
is that not the transparency?
You can read that. You can read that a dozen different ways. So that's just I was going to say. Like maybe that then that's just being honest.
Yeah,
actually, you're not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes.
Especially after the interview that he'd just done, like he's literally talking about like having to look into what's gone wrong at the club. I think if they said, "Oh, if we mutually agreed," it kind of just points towards like, you didn't have any control in terms of the situation. Like it would just be,
it's just again very 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 odd. Scott, have you seen that interview, the post-match one?
Yeah, I watched it last night as well.
So this is interesting, right? So I've seen it, but only after the news broke. So when you watched it last night, obviously not knowing what was to come, what was your kind of takeaways from that interview as it went out last night?
Well, I would even refer back to Thursday. Was it Thursday or Friday they brought out the pre-match one? I was chatting to my dad about it, and the both of us kind of agreed that he seemed to be already talking quite. It wasn't quite him. It was a bit negative in terms of, this is what we'll do if we go behind, or this is what we need to stick together if we lose or something. I'm like, well, it's the opening day of the season. You shouldn't be talking about losing, really, or what you. Of course, you've got to react if you go behind. Like it was simple things that I was thinking that why is he bringing this up? And then the whole stuff about fitness, sharpness, again, just kind of rung bells of there's something definitely not right here. But at the same time, did I think in 18 hours time that we're going to be talking about needing a new manager? Absolutely not. It was just, I think it was a guy that just seemed genuinely confused at why a very similar squad seemed to be struggling to pick up where it was kind of at last season for most of the season, not obviously, especially in sort of end of December to March, we kind of struggled a wee bit. That, to me, coincided with we had a few injuries with our best players as well. But I did think that the interview was just in general it was a bit off from Murray, and Davey did pick up on it and say, like, obviously Cheers have been really sort of open about the whole situation, because at the same time, Murray could have easily just said the very basics, or we weren't at it, whatever, and then just you would only got 4 minutes with him. It was ended up about 9 minutes there. So he's told us what he really thinks, and at the end of the day, that's what you want from what was our manager.
Yeah,
He was saying about the negativity in the pre-match and wondering why he was doing that. Have you considered we were playing Airdrie?
It's a new season.
It's still bloody Airdrie.
And I
New
mean,
season, same shit the way.
Managers aren't strangers to kind of using interviews to send messages upstairs and all that kind of stuff. And we've seen it already in this division this year. You see fairly obvious
In this county.
Managers wondering why the bloody hell is my team not sending a doctor to this game? And it's a case of saying, I'm not being treated right. Now, Blair, do you think that's what Murray was doing yesterday? Albeit it would be much more subtle than that, but do you think that's what he was doing, and he's overplayed his hand or something along those lines?
Honestly, no. I get how it would come across like that, and I genuinely think most football fans watching that from other teams would kind of think that might be the case, because, like you say, it's a really normal thing. He did exactly the same 2 years ago, the opening game at Cove. They were rotten. They went up to Cove and they got beat. And his interview was probably the most refreshing interview I think I've heard a manager give after a game. And, well, when we'd listen to McGlynn flapping about and asking if he could count for the previous seasons before that. But it was really frank. It was very much, this was the game plan. Didn't do it. We need to analyse why it didn't happen. We need to put something in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. I think the difference yesterday was you couldn't come away from that thinking he's the man that's going to sort this problem. That was my only concern with that interview last night. My genuine, and I said it out loud watching a video, I was like, fair play, because that's exactly what we thought. Like, genuinely, it was almost a carbon copy. But then it was that kind of, as it sunk in, and after a bit of time, I kind of thought, like, can he fix this? And yeah, for me, that was probably the first time. I wouldn't say I'm questioning whether he should have been in the job or not, because I'm still very much shocked. But, hindsight's a wonderful thing. And we've talked about, the statement about the form and since December and stuff. But the numbers don't lie. I mean, 41 points in the first 18 was ridiculous. It was ridiculous form, probably far ahead of what, and he said himself, he was trying to temper expectation, far ahead of where we probably should have been. And then you get 28 out of 18 in the second half of the season. And as Callum said, we would have finished third had that been the start of the season, if you like. But we would have only been 6 points off Dundee United. We'd have been ahead of Partick Thistle. Did anybody look at Dundee United or Partick Thistle in the second half of last season and think, man, they're the team you need to beat? Because they weren't going with any great guns either. And I wonder whether getting to the playoff final, or getting to the playoffs in second place, getting to the playoff final and stuff, almost was a bit of a stay of execution for them in that sense, whether the board have been actually thinking this for a lot longer than what we have. Because I don't think there's any Rovers fan who's going to look at this and go, based on performances since December, the board are wrong. This is absolutely not the right decision. I'm with you, Duncan, I don't agree with the decision. But there's a bit of me going, if that's their reasoning, it's kind of hard to argue. Like, it hasn't been good since December.
See, just to expand on that, Blair, I think it's a very valid point that, like, bearing in mind, Brian Graham could have buried that chance in the last minute of the playoffs.
Totally.
Saying, we got knocked, we came close with United, but then we got knocked out in the semi-finals, or the quarter-finals of the playoffs, or semi-finals, whatever it was. But yeah, as well, I think it's one of those things where I can't remember where I heard it before, but with your managers, they're never as bad or never as good as they seem to be.
So true.
And I think that that's like a very valid thing to remember right now. Like, Iain Murray was he was a good manager, but like to take us to that next level, I think is like, it's going to be intriguing to see who the board go for now to sort of replace it. But I mean, he wasn't terrible, but it's like at the same time, like there was still areas that he could have improved in. I enjoyed the football that his teams were playing, but at the same time, since the turn of the year, yeah, it's still a valid point that I don't think they were sort of swashbuckling or free flowing. I think it was very much a case of like, look, we were getting the job done, but we know that we've got a level or two above that. And even Murray acknowledged that in his interviews. He was saying that some of the players weren't playing at the level that they could be. It was something that really jumped out about it. And how does he get them back to that point? So yeah.
Yeah, it comes back to timing for me, and this sort of, like, I think your point about Brian Graham's a really fair one, but I would sort of hope that my board are kind of operating on a higher level than that. Like, either your manager's the right manager or he's not. Again, I kind of made that point before with the whole, like, when did you first realise? It shouldn't be the case that you're standing there at full time looking at your watch and, like, you've got one hand over the print button on the P45 and then, a last minute equaliser goes in and you're like, what? That's you saved for another week. And it's actually the type, even like if this had happened partway through the season, even it would make some more sense. It's the fact it's the first game of the season. But then, conversely, if we'd beaten Airdrie 1-0 yesterday, would Iain Murray still be the manager? You'd have to assume so.
Probably.
But then, why? Because how long does that dynamic go on for then?
Yeah.
Like, I don't... If he's so close to being sacked that, yeah, basically par for the course to the League Cup group, and then you get beat 1-0 away from home to a decent Airdrie side, that's you sacked. Sack him 8 weeks ago. Because that's an irretrievable position, basically. You are only ever 3 games away from being sacked. I don't understand that aspect of it. And it makes it difficult for me to take it on face value, that statement, that basically says results haven't been good enough. We've only had one so far. Like, the
But it's not just results, though, is it?
Duncan, in the group chat, I said when we were all, obviously everything was blown up and everything, that how long would they have waited if we had beat Airdrie, got a draw against Partick, then lost the Ayr? Oh, right, he's lost. We can put this out now because he's lost the game. Like, that's how it felt, and that's how it came across in the statement. Yes, they're saying they've stated it's from the 1st of January because they've said this year, but as you say, do it in the summer if he's been that below par. It just makes no sense to me.
But they haven't said just results, though, have they? They've said results and performances, and I think that's actually the crucial bit, because we won some games in the second half of last season and we were guff, and there's no two ways around it. There was, but like the League Cup campaign, and Duncan, you put, I still think you nailed completely the description. It was par. But what were the performances like? Were they good? Were they not good? And see a point that it was one of my mates made last night on the way back on the bus, and it really got me thinking. Actually, was see if you compare yesterday to the game at Partick Thistle in the first game of last season, right? And I referenced this on the show through the week. Half time, we're 2-0 down, and I go to the toilet, and it's like carnage. Murray doesn't care what he's doing, get him out, he's rubbish, he's blah, blah, blah. And I was like, nonsense. We have created umpteen chances, we haven't been able to take them, but we're knocking at the door. It's yesterday, we could have played for another 3 or 4 90 minutes and still no created a chance yesterday. There is categorically something wrong. And I don't think he knows what it is. I ultimately think that's the reason he's probably not in that job anymore.
I think you're right. I think you're spot on with that. I think it was really crucial in his interview where he's almost like shrugging his shoulders and saying, I'm worried that it's something a bit deeper. And, you know, like, I think that there's probably been something, I'm not saying that it's been a critical thing that he said in his interview, but it's possibly been in the way that the board have looked at that and thought, the performances aren't getting better, the results have been not where we want them to be, and you're standing in front of the camera doing an interview that's going to go out to the fan base saying you're not really sure what the problem is. I don't think that's probably not gained them any credit with the board, and it's certainly not
Buy a season ticket.
Yeah, totally. So, like, I'm disappointed he's left, but I can fully see you're the guy in charge that we're paying to put the performances on the park and get the results on the board, and you're kind of standing in front of us and shrugging your shoulders and saying you're not really sure what the problem is. It possibly has not inspired the confidence in the board that they've needed, and they've thought, right, we've made our decision, we're going to get you out now, and give the new man the longest possible time.
Yeah, and you made this point earlier, Iain, about one of the things he says in that interview is like the fitness doesn't seem to be there. I'm like, that's under his remit. Might not be directly. You've got members of the kind of staff who are directly there for fitness, but like you're the gaffer, you're there to see that. So that, I mean, there is an element of that where I think you're right. I think that is that if you had to sort of boil that interview down into one gesture, it would just be into one emoji. It would be the sort of shrug emoji, like don't really know what's happened there. And I mean, credit to him for like, he takes 9 minutes and he does explain it all, but fundamentally that's what it comes back to. And I think I can't remember, sorry, who said it earlier, that I think a lot of managers would have done a 2-minute interview there, and they would have just gone, that's not good enough, we'll be on the training ground, see you Thursday. But that, it's definitely you can sort of find ways to justify it. And I think that's still we're still at that kind of scrambling stage of it was just such an out of the blue thing. And I suppose
my next stages in it. We went through denial. We're now at.
I've got visions of people
bargaining.
Like,
I think
I can't wait to listen to this Raith Rovers podcast and hear what's happened about their like views on like Iain Murray leaving, and it's all just going, can't believe that happened. Hey, it's just
it's like what the hell's happened there?
Absolutely bonkers.
Well, I suppose so. My next question then, Callum, given everything that's happened today, whoever comes in as the next manager, whether they're preordained or whether it's someone who'll be kind of found over the next couple of weeks through a thorough recruitment process, do they have to win the league?
Yes.
I think.
Well, they have to get promoted.
Have to win the league. Yeah, at least promoted. It's like it's us, Partick, and Livingston who we've got the top 3 squads, basically. Who I reckon will be top 3.
I would chuck Air in there as well. Give Air credit after their win.
Air as well.
10-man hammer.
So it's a really competitive league, but when you look at the quality of the squads, you have to say that us and Partick have got the 2 best, and so it's like we have to build on last season at a minimum. I feel that the board have been pretty open to saying we want Premier League football. So I feel like, winning the league is something that is the expectation for whoever does come in.
And
I think I'd probably disagree with the we have to get promoted. The board were pretty open that there was a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And that 5-year plan progressed to the point where we were last season much quicker than what they thought. So if there was a 5-year plan for the last manager, why would a new manager come in and they say, right, that 5-year plan that the last manager was working under, that's gone. You've got a 1-year plan and get promoted.
Sorry to jump in, but surely Iain Murray could have a good case of standing up this evening and say, what happened to my 5-year plan?
Absolutely. I'd 100% agree with you, and I think he would have a very good point. I just can't see how the board can do all the media stuff where they're talking about a 5-year plan and give Iain Murray that time that they then didn't give him, and then someone new comes in and they say,
So-
that's now gone, and you've got a 1 year plan. You better get us promoted, or you're out the door.
So I just
How
think
much of
it's
the
sorry,
five-year
Robbie.
plan though ties into like structural in terms of like changing Starks Park, the stuff with the dressing rooms, like changing the office space, etc., etc. All these ideas that they've came in with, and I think it's worth saying it as well. The group that they've got on this board, obviously, 3 of them came from Kelty. So Barham, Potter, and Dean McKenzie. They're very used to like having that almost expectancy in terms of success of what they've done. We're bringing Kelty up, and probably applying the same philosophy in terms of what happened there to Rovers. So I do wonder if there maybe is a slight difference between the footballing side and compared to like the club and the community side that they've got, where they're sort of maybe a bit more direct with it.
Maybe
So-
with the off the field stuff as well. I know it's been mentioned where it's like there's a bunch of stuff where to get it done we need to be in the Premiership because of the money the Premiership brings in. So it might be like a financial incentive, and with it being a pretty competitive championship, there isn't a big gun Premiership team that's dropped down this season. The board might be like, this is our best chance to go up.
You've got to be realistic as well. The expectations will change depending on the situations. So, like as Callum rightfully says there, like I think if you don't make a really good fist of going up this season, and you see the way that we performed against Airdrie yesterday, and it's much the same as last season, where it's quite flat, insipid, like you're probably thinking, well, missing a really good opportunity here to make a crack towards like the league title.
So I suppose that was kind of what was at the back of my question, really, is, you know, we were 2 games away from being promoted last season. And I mean, those 2 games we didn't do particularly well.
Really good.
6-1 by Ross County. But to be fair, we got to the playoff final, right? So in terms of how close can you get without getting promoted, stage by stage, as close as you can get. Got to the playoff final, fell short. 90 minutes later, in terms of league football, manager's been sacked, right? So, well, I say maybe slight bit of kind of mischief in the question, really. But you're fundamentally saying, right, well, you've got to do better than the last guy because he lost his job. So it's either win the playoff final or win the league, I would have thought.
Mhm.
But to be slightly more kind of nuanced about it, right? See if I could ask Andrew Barrowman one question just now. And if I didn't know that you could submit loads of questions. If I could just ask him the one
All right,
question.
Richard.
What I would want to know is,
Why do we
site-
not leave somebody up at a corner?
so
Sorry.
in this statement that we've picked apart several times already, they cite results and performances. What's the balance? What's the weight given to each of those, right? Because results-wise, if we had beaten Ross County, and I know, again, I recognise, right, it was a 5-goal gap, so you're talking about more than just, you know, one shot going over the bar in the last minute. But if we had beaten Ross County, presumably we wouldn't have sacked Iain Murray then, because that would be better than we did now. But so we get promoted, and if we get beat today because we were at home to St Johnstone in the Premier League, would they get sacked? Or would the result do that? And conversely, like, when they talk about performances, is that... This is a long question, Andrew. When they talk about performances, is that style of football? Or are they looking at that and going, oh, we're not, you know, passing the ball enough? Or is it the kind of more, what I suspect, which is like a kind of bit of lack of cohesion and not kind of creating enough chances and this feeling that we're not getting enough out of some of the players that we've got? But then, so what if somebody comes in, whoever they may be, like the performances kind of come secondary to the results? Because it's like, what I was going to say there is, what if all the performances look better but we finish third? They're like, well, and that's kind of difficult to imagine, but like...
Happened with Barry Smith and John McGlynn, you would say.
Completely possible, aye.
Yeah.
Can I just highlight as well, sorry, that last season we brought up about, we've said many times, surely you wouldn't do it after the first game of the season. But I just didn't understand when Partick Thistle lost on penalty kicks to go up, then lost a 2-goal lead against us in the first game of the season and drew 2-2 us, I didn't see Doolan get sacked.
Doolan's still here.
Doolan wasn't there. It was McCall, wasn't it? Or was it?
Well, he wasn't sacked at that point as their manager, is what I'm saying.
Is it not? See the whole performance, and I think you're right, Duncan, and I think, Scott, you're right as well. We're all basically on the same page here. But if you take the results performances thing, right, and you just take the old analogy of light at the end of the tunnel. So right now, can you say, I mean, Duncan, I know you were there because I smudged past you at one point trying to get to my seat, but if you were sitting in Airdrie yesterday watching that game, was there light at the end of the tunnel? I have to be honest and say no. I didn't see how we were going to change that. I didn't see where it was going to come from. It's like a team that achieved 41 points in the first half of last season seems like a million miles away from what we've got in the park at the moment. And arguably it's a stronger squad. But what's lacking is, well, I'm ashamed of myself for using the word pizzazz, but that sparkle, that thing that made us win games late on. Like,
Blair, can you remember when we were in the old second division and Ross County and Airdrie were in the league with us and Dick Campbell was the manager in charge? They won at Starks Park and then Dick Campbell got sacked because Roy McGregor came out and said that they were not playing with enough style and panache. And everyone thought, who the fuck is this guy? That's pretty much where we're at right now. We've just done it in a bit of a different way. It's just a bit like, right, I think it's you can see
if we weren't.
Go on.
I was just going to say, see if we weren't playing well, but we were. I just think it sounds so daft, but it keeps coming back to my head. We're not creating any chances.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all said, probably not as publicly as what we have in the group chat, but there's massive questions over Jack Hamilton at the moment. Massive questions over him. Because he has not hit the ground running in any way, shape or form the way that any Rovers fan wanted him to. But you kind of look at it now and you go, he's not missing sitters. He's not getting 5 or 6 chances a game and blowing them all. I'm like, we seem to become this team who just doesn't create anything. And we've got some really creative players. I don't get it.
I think
Stanton was anonymous. Stanton was anonymous yesterday. Nothing went through the middle. It was all just long balls up the wing to hopefully Callum Smith. And annoyingly, with Callum Smith yesterday, he was getting into these really good positions, but then he was just losing the ball, and it was just nothingness. I
feel like Joe Exotic going on here about tiger cages, but I think that Lewis Gibson, I think a lot of people really wanted to see him come in straight from the start, given the lack of progress that we've made down the wings. But again, we just stuck with the tried and tested. I feel like, Blair, the more that this goes on and the more that you speak, the more I'm kind of like, he's pretty spot on with that. Like, I feel like now that you're like saying it, and I think you're vocalising like probably what a lot of the Rovers fans have maybe said. And as I say, Iain Murray had a lot of good grace in terms of like our support, and he spoke his mind. But I think that in terms of the performances, as you say, that there's been a lot to be desired, and that you would hope. I'm really intrigued as to how this goes in terms of like who we get to fix it and what the changes in terms of our style of play and how we go about. Particularly where we're at, because we'll be given the person that comes in until the end of the window. We'll obviously have loan deals with clubs becoming a bit more ready to loan out players, so how things are influenced. But really the direction that we take next, and I'm sure we'll come on to it in time in this podcast, is like, what direction do we really go next? Because it feels like it's quite sparse in terms of the options, much like with forwards and centre backs. It feels like the options for managers, as a fan, you're looking and you're like, this is pretty sparse out there.
I think a lot of the confusion will probably come, like when another team that's not your own sacks a manager and you're like, what are they doing? There's a lot of that happening right now for us. And I think a lot of the confusion will probably come from Iain Murray's essentially been sacked because he's not met intangible metrics. So the performances aren't quite good enough. We're not really creating enough chances. We're not playing in the style that the board want them to be playing in. These aren't really measurable metrics. Do you know what I mean? It's like they will understand, and they'll understand the decision because the board obviously watch it every week. But if you're from the outside looking in, you're like, well, they finished second last year. They got beat the playoff final, and then they've done all right in the League Cup. So I think the confusion will come from that kind of sacking on, as I say, those intangible metrics where it's not immediately apparently obvious as to why we've done it. Last thing I wanted to touch on there as well, Robbie, you mentioned Lewis Gibson. I'm a wee bit concerned at the level that some of our support seem to be pinning their hopes on Gibson.
A kid.
Yeah.
He's 18 years old.
Lee
He's not
Bryce.
played Championship football before, and you've got guys sitting in the stand saying, "Get Gibson on!" from about half-time yesterday. Like, yes, I think he's had a very good start to the season, and yes, I would like to see a lot more of him. But let's not get ahead of ourselves with it.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
100%.
He's an 18-year-old guy, and let's not pin our hopes of our season on, get Gibson on. And you just need to be a wee bit more. Think about it a wee bit more.
Yeah.
Also, last season, we how many times did we, as a podcast, say there's got to be a sense of realism here? We're having an unreal season. Like, we've talked about the plan that they've got for 5 years, and obviously that's on and off the park together. On the park, they talked about how we're ahead of schedule, and Murray was saying that with the whole 41 points in 18 games and stuff. In that was a 1-0 defeat at Airdrie, very similar performance. So what's changed from that to go into this season, and the fact that it's one game into the season, Iain Murray could still have brought in a couple of players. You get a couple of wins, your confidence goes through the roof because you're like, we're actually back now. Like, that's all it takes. It's literally just a win, and your form can literally just change like that. So that's why I think it just feels so reactionary to me, for the fact that I just feel that we've been watching Raith Rovers for years, and this was as close as we've been to the Premiership in my lifetime of watching Raith Rovers. So why have we just went, oh, Ken Watt saw that we're going to bring in somebody else that we think is better, when any manager coming in is a gamble? Like that. I feel like I'm the one that seems to be most disappointed in this, but like at the same time, I've seen it on social media. There is people that are unhappy with this as well. So it is. Yeah. Everyone's got their own opinion, obviously.
I'm with you, Scott. I have to say, I think, to be fair, I think we're doing what all football fans do, which is just rationalising stuff so that we can just be content again. But it's like, there's a certain point where there's a real thing. We do it with players as well. We certainly did it with Zach Rudden, where as long as somebody is wearing a tracksuit with a Rovers patch on it, you're just like all in on them. Just like the greatest guy, absolutely fine. And it convert, like, as soon as they don't, you just immediately, you're like, never liked him anyway. Like,
Toy Story dropping the toilet.
keeps everybody back at corners. What? Like, just the. But no, I really agree with you, Scott. And I think the thing for me is I think Iain Murray's a victim of his own success, because we keep
nailed it
comparing this Rovers team to this Rovers team. So it's different when you're like. You get a new manager in, or you're assessing your manager, and you're like, we've gone backwards since the last guy. Like, Barry Smith came in, and to be fair, he came in after Huddies, but you were sort of comparing him to basically John McGlynn Mark 1, and it's like, it's not as good. He's more or less trying to do the same thing, and he's not as good. He's not as good as Ray McKinnon was either. And then he left, and we just went and got John McGlynn back again. But I don't think we're going, Iain Murray's not as good as John McGlynn's last season. Now, I think, to be fair, you could make a point on style of play if you really wanted to, but I've not heard anyone do that. But nobody's going, we're not as good as we were before Iain Murray came in. We're going, we're not as good as Iain Murray was 6 months ago or 8 months ago. And equally, we're not doing, it's not like with players or anything either. Now, that's not to say that that managers sometimes they kind of hit a decline and they can't get back to where they were. But it does feel, I think he's a victim of his own success. I think we were basically going, you started so well last season and then couldn't sustain it. And to your point, Scott, it's like, what's to say that a new manager coming in can do that bit? Or even the bit where you second half of the season, we were still fine. We were still, what were we saying, third form-wise? I don't think last season, at the start of the season, anybody was going, that's a nailed-on second or third best squad in the division. And the other thing as well, to go back just a little bit, talking about the problems that we've got, talking about not creating enough and all that kind of stuff. And it sounds like, Blair, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like yesterday, effectively for you, was like endemic of the larger issues. Like yesterday was the problems we've been having for 6 months, kind of in a nutshell. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So, in that sense, then, when it comes to trying to fix it, and Robbie, you more or less said that. Like, how do you fix this? What do you do that? What does the new guy do when he comes in? And I don't know about you, but like, this is not a spoiler. It's not going to be me. But if it was, and I was like, right, how are you going to fix this? Sort of my immediate reaction would be like, I'm going to need new players, like, or I basically just want another striker. To be fair, like, give me another striker and I'll go from there. But and to come back to the wider point, it's like I feel like Iain Murray could have had that chance as much as anything. Like, I'm not overly convinced that this downturn in performances rests solely at the feet of Iain Murray, effectively. I don't think that he's turning up to his work in the morning and is doing enough stuff wrong that warrants him losing his job. It's probably my overall thing. And that's not the way the world works. That's not the way football works. It's not about fairness. It's not about anything. Fundamentally, a new guy will come in, whether that's tomorrow or whether that's a month from now. And if that new guy gets results, then that justifies the sacking. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Iain Murray can't pay his mortgage because he gets sacked. It doesn't matter. That's not the consideration. The consideration is, can we get someone who gets more points on the board than he will? And that's the only thing that matters. But knowing what we know, and right now we don't know who the new manager will be, I find it impossible to agree with the decision, fundamentally, as we sit here just now.
I also think that if last season we finished so poorly, apparently, and had lost a few games 3 or 4-0, and then lost yesterday 3 or 4-0, I think I would be more inclined to being ready for it could happen. But the fact that we only lost 1 game in this year, 2 games. We lost to Dundee United 2-0, and we lost to Ross County, obviously heavily up in the Highlands. They're the only 2 games that we...
Airdrie at Starks, we lost 3-1.
Yeah, he scored in the last minute.
Oh, yeah. So we lost 3 games in that whole time that by more than a goal.
More than 1 goal.
Every other game, we've been right in a game till the very end. So it's not like, as you referred earlier, Grant Murray getting pumped 4-0 at home every second week, basically, for half a season, it felt like. Like, this just seems... I didn't get it. I keep coming round to it, I just didn't get it.
The point that you were saying earlier, Duncan, though, is like, and I know I sort of mentioned it before, but it didn't have the Barry Smith feel of like, he's just a result away from getting punted. Like, it didn't. No. And I think for going forward, to use the dip into the cliche of myself and Leslie referring to computer games involving football, it's kind of like on Football Manager when you're searching for a player or a manager and you go into the filters box and you're like, right, okay, I want attacking football. Okay, you tick a box and that's going to eliminate a whole load of managers. To work with a director of football or technical director in John Potter, you tick it. So it's more, I'm really intrigued as to see who we end up with, given the sort of like niche circumstances for where we're at as a club and what we're looking for to move forward. But yeah, it just feels very strange that you're looking at stuff like Jack Hamilton coming on and getting injured within a minute that Iain Murray spoke about. Like the injury.
It was the way he spoke about it, though. That was the bit in the interview that was weird.
Yeah,
that was weird.
I think, though, to be fair, I think any football manager has a right to be aggrieved at that situation. When you have someone that you employ, or that you are, someone that you brought in, someone who works for you, put it that way, someone who works for you, who is in charge of making sure your players are conditioned, and someone runs on the park and then picks up a muscle injury, rightly or wrongly, I think you've got a right to be like,
He seemed to be aggrieved with Jack Hamilton, though. I don't know if I just read it that way, but that interview, it was almost like he was saying, aye, and Jack Hamilton, what's that all about? Like, comes on the pitch and then goes off injured.
It did sound like that. I read it as the situation rather than as a personal criticism.
Screaming at Jack Hamilton's hamstring like, fuck off.
But that, because it's just, I think that's the kind of thing that, and again, it would make more sense, as I said before, if like we'd lost 5 games on the bounce and he's desperately trying to turn it around, and you're like, fuck, I bring my striker on, and he gets injured 2 minutes in with nobody anywhere near him. So the thing that's weird is not only that that's not the situation, but that is how it sounds. Like Ian Murray was speaking as if that was the situation, and he's been sacked as if that was the situation. It's odd that it's not the situation. Anyway, I think that like the other one to touch on yesterday just slightly, might as well. Like the Jack Hamilton one, I think goes down as a kind of that one you could look at and go,
that was brutal.
Yeah, like I'll tell you this. See if I'm the guy on the bench whose job is strength and conditioning, and I see that happening, I'm like, please don't look at me like that. And again, like, look, these kind of things happen as a freak occurrence, and you can't do anything about it. But there is a guy there whose job it is to kind of try and prevent that sort of stuff. The Callum Fordyce one is just like, there's nothing you can do about that. It's I mean, other than not,
you wouldn't change it,
flying into 50-50s. But it's again like the boy Frizzell, who is half his size, goes into that just as much, and apart from his boot flying off into the air, is fine. Like, so there's nothing you can do about that. And I think fundamentally,
boot ended up in Coatbridge.
It was like the thing in 2001, is it just spun into the sky. I think that game finishes 0-0 if Callum Fordyce finishes the game, basically. Not because I think that Liam Dick did any worse. I thought he did fine. Not even necessarily that I think that like Callum Fordyce would have like blocked that header on the line or anything. I just think it changed the pattern of the game in Airdrie's favour. We weren't quite keeping the ball the same way that we were to whatever degree. And listen, we were never going to score. That just was never going to happen. But I think we would have ground out a 0-0, and both managers would have come out after the game and said, that was terrible. Like, we created nothing. It was a midfield mire. I mean, to be fair, Blair, as you said, you kind of nudged by me about maybe 10 minutes into the game.
That was me arriving.
Yeah, caught up in traffic. You missed the best bit of the game, as far as the Rovers were concerned. The Rovers came flying out the traps. First 5 minutes, it looked like everything you would want. They were hunting in packs. They were closing Airdrie down, chasing boys into the corner, turning the ball over. And then, actually, to be fair, I think I've worked it out. You're a jinx, because you turned up and that nod disappeared completely.
That's fair. He's going to be rapping on his door like, what are you doing?
That's fair.
But the thing is, like, that did then disappear. And I don't know if that's where Ian Murray's talking about, like, fitness-wise, that just totally dropped off. But then again, like, there's weird decisions as well. Like, I don't think we've had any justification for why Ross Matthews played instead of Kieran Freeman. And listen, you can come up with 2 very easy ones. Either Kieran Freeman's got some kind of knock, or actually Ian Murray reckons he's not been playing well enough and he thinks Ross Matthews finished the season strongly at right back and prefers him. But either way, I don't think anybody saw that coming.
The latter two, I think.
And Vaughan starting out of nowhere, having not kicked the ball, to start out of nowhere. Again, it's just, it's weird. Like when you start, it's like when someone goes missing and their family start with like, oh, mind last Tuesday, he did say something odd. It's like that. You're trying to put together these puzzle pieces to try and make sense of what has been a very nonsensical day.
Chucking Vaughan straight in from the start, maybe that Ian Murray was a bit under the pressure, and that there have been conversations before to sort of like say, like, look, we need performances to pick up, and we need things to pick up. Like,
I don't
doubt
those conversations have taken place,
especially given like what has been said before. Like, yeah, we need to give Lewis as much protection as possible, given his track record, which again completely understandable. And no one will. We say this all the time. Nobody's going to want to play a game of football more than Lewis Vaughan. I think you would practically have to keep him back in the changing rooms to stop him from playing. But yeah, it just seems very strange to like go straight to 0 to 100 with that one.
I actually think that Matthews playing right back and Vaughan playing so long as he played, it might have been a bit of posturing from Murray, where he's saying, like, we've not got the options in these areas that I'd like us to have, and here's what I'm having to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, Freeman, I think has been quite unfairly, Blair, you had a very enjoyable rant on it where she was quite tired and really enjoyed listening to that. But Freeman's been quite vilified quite unfairly. But he's not been the right back that we thought we were. Well, I don't know if anybody thought that's what we were getting.
No, that's fair.
What I think we needed. And Murray has maybe thought the same and has thought, I'm going to put a midfielder in there to let the board know that I'm not happy with the current situation that we've got in there. Same with Vaughan. I'm sure that Ian Murray doesn't, want to have Lewis Vaughan playing 80 minutes yesterday. But it could just possibly be that he's wanted to kind of make a point to the board, like, look, this is what I'm having to do. You're risking Lewis Vaughan by he's going to have to play more minutes than I'd like him to play at this moment in time, unless we get a striker in.
Certainly. If you take as your problem statement, this team is not creating enough chances. Vaughan going into the starting lineup, at least in theory, goes a long way to addressing that. So I think that does make sense if he's under a bit of pressure, and also, as you say, Ian, if he's like, look, right now I've only got one way to try and address this. It does kind of make sense. Sorry, Blair, you were coming in there.
I was just going to say, I agree with your point, Ian, and what you're saying. My issue with it is that he didn't have to do either of those things yesterday. He could have easily played Freeman at right back. He could have put Matthews in the middle, had Stanton in the 10, and still had Callum Smith up front, basically like he did at Ross County. So the idea, I get the point that managers do this in a way of going, well, look what you've got to work with. But actually, it's almost like a false economy, because he didn't have to do either of those things yesterday. Nobody going into that stadium, well, in my case at 3:10, thought that was the... I don't think anybody saw that starting lineup and thought, yes, that's what we needed to do. And everybody saw it and thought, what, how, why? Like, it just... I don't know. The thing is, and I know I'm kind of almost at the stage now where I'm rationalising this more than I'm comfortable with. Because my gut reaction was actually exactly the reaction that Iain had. I just didn't tweet it. It was, nah, this is a freaking joke. Like, this is out of order. It's horrific. And I must admit, the more I kind of dwell on it and the more I go through it, I'm just at a stage where I'm thinking, like, there's an element of the board have come in and they've created this machine that we've got at Starks Park just now. And we talk about Ian Murray having credit in the bank. I think the board have got credit in the bank. And I think for me personally, for the first time in a long time, I think I'm at the stage where I'm thinking, I don't think they would have done this if they thought there was another option. I think they've done this because they think it's the right thing to do and because they've got a plan up their sleeve and they know what they kind of want to do. So there's a little bit of me running on faith more than anything else in the board. But it's just caught everybody by surprise because nobody thought that was the case.
It completely comes down to the next appointment, whether or not that good faith is... like if we go out and get the next appointment wrong, everybody's like, should never have sacked Murray. Totally. Crazy decision. What a joke. Do you know what I mean? And the board are right up against it. If they go out and we appoint someone and we go on a massive run, everybody's like, well, obviously that was the right decision, and the board have... you know what I mean?
Yeah,
totally.
Football's done on fine margins, and this is just about as fine as it gets.
But you don't think there's even the possibility we go out against Partick on Saturday and we're this free-flowing football side who create loads of chances, and you're sitting in the stand going, well, maybe Murray was the problem. Like, it's just, like you say, such fine margins. But I think that we can get really hung up on the, like I said already, we can get hung up on the points totals and stuff. But there's been something missing for a while. And I don't think anybody who goes as regularly as what we do or watches games as regularly as we do hasn't seen it. There's something missing.
It did strike me the last few interviews that Ian Murray's done that he did talk about, like, pre-match ones. He was saying, like, all players going into their shells and stuff like that. And you're thinking, well, surely it's like, what's changed between, like, the difference between the start of last season, that where perceivably they aren't in their shells, to like now.
Yeah.
So what's happened? What's been the major difference? And
I mean, you do. It's interesting again. I think, like, looking at that Rovers side, again, we'll have all seen it managers in the past, where you can, whether you're right or wrong, you can point at things and go, that's why this team is shite. Like, you know, he's and not even necessarily just the Rovers. But you see a team and you're like, this manager insists on playing out from the back and they keep conceding goals. Or it's like
Emre continues to sign Kurt Broadfoot on
yeah, exactly.
deals. Like, what are you doing, Dougie? Why?
Broadfoot. Like, and then you see, like, oh, you know, he always plays a back three and he doesn't have that many defenders, James. Like, you've got these things that you can point at. Whereas with Ian Murray's Rovers, it doesn't feel as obvious as that to me. Like, there's nothing there where I'm like, you know, again, without resorting to cliche, other than, like, he leaves everybody back at corners. There's nothing else where you're like, you know, oh, he keeps doing this or he keeps doing that. Like, there's lots of stuff that we've seen that was enforced, like, you know, had to keep playing Scott Brown at centre half. But other than certain bits and pieces, like, there's nobody. You know, we've had the platform of this podcast, and I don't think we would be shy if we were like, you know, why does he keep leaving player X on the bench? And I don't think we've really had. I can't think of anything like that where it's like,
see, if we'd started the podcast a year earlier, I think it would have been interesting to go back and listen to like what we would have been saying about the first half of the like season when he was first in charge, when he would like throw all the players forward. And he didn't have the options that were available when we were using the likes of Connor McBride and we're going sticking two at the back against Cally Thistle and then going 2-0 down in the 90th minute. Like, I think our perceptions changed quite a lot in that basis. And again, that's probably something like going back to that point about your managers never as bad or fully as good as you think they are. Like, I'm not going to miss that, like, chucking on attackers for the sake of it, albeit even though it did provide some incredibly ridiculous moments last season, there was also a number of times where we got caught out by it. So yeah, it's one of those.
That's that chance thing again, because you come back to and Duncan, you actually mentioned it in the group chat. I'm surprised you've not mentioned it in the show yet. But the people who are saying, you know, you take away the late goals and how good were we really? Like, no, you can't take away the late goals because they happened and they happened for a reason. But the reason that the late goals were lucky narrative really pissed me off last year was because we were knocking at the door for 90 minutes. We were creating umpteen chances and just couldn't get the ball over the line. And they'd chuck everything at it in the hope of getting just another couple of chances. And we created those chances and we scored. But they were coming.
That Cally game, the first game up at Cally away, when we scored 90th minute again, with the Callum penalty, was it? Like, we had the ball pretty much 90% over the line, and we could have been 2-1 up at that point, or 2-0 up. But then we had to get the 90th minute to go to win. There was plenty of other opportunities like that, and there was a few games where we obviously came away. You look at the Queen's Park ones, and you probably say, well, those were like relatively poorer performances in the grander scheme. But yeah, I think that's a very good point to make, though, Blair. It's like just a lot of it's just driven by narrative.
Yeah, I think you're right. That my sort of overarching thesis point on those last minute goals has been that it kept happening, and that. Yeah. But you're right, it kept happening because it was an established pattern of play, an established pattern of behaviour. So we kept creating chances, we kept scoring goals, and we kept scoring late goals. And it really annoyed me that people kept saying you can't keep up for a whole season, and because we didn't finish second. But you're right that people were. This is what annoyed me about it, was people were talking like we weren't creating any chances, and then we popped up and scored in the last minute. But it wasn't. It was when we did it multiple times over a short space of time, and it did then fall away. And to sort of counter my last point, the balancing act of that. So there's nothing tangible, or there's nothing obvious to punters like us when you watch that Rovers side where you go, that's a problem. Like, you know, as you like the playing a back three that the players can't play or anything like that. But you do also get, with managers at all levels, the intangibles, the behind the scenes things. The thing that's kind of coming to my mind at the moment was like famously, Jose Mourinho had this kind of shelf life where it was like he would come in, is it 3 years? Like he'd come in, he'd be absolutely fine. After 3 years, the players were shattered. They were fed up with him. Like his sort of shtick had worn thin and things started to fall apart. Now, I've got no idea if there's a similar thing at play here with Iain Murray, but it could be something like that, where the things that were working because they were new and the things that were working previously have stopped working. And if you're in and around the football club, if you're on the board and you're on the training ground, maybe that's apparent. Maybe that is something that you can see. But again, I think it's kind of grasping at straws, looking for kind of sense in the darkness, because fundamentally on the tangibles, on what's visible to us from the outside, it doesn't make any sense. And that, again, is where, like, I don't have a name in my head, but I mean, conceivably, there are football managers out there that if the Rovers announce them tomorrow, we'll all go, oh, right enough. Doesn't guarantee it's going to work, but like, right, okay, I can see what the plan was here. I can see why you've done that. And it's at this point where we've only got, 90 words to work on, that it's kind of the more difficult to see.
I would add as well that the majority of people in play here at the moment, you've got I don't know how, if he'll be involved, but like John Potter's obviously technical director, whether he'll be involved in like any recruitment process or whether they'll say to him like, what do you think about this one? You've got Andrew Barham in. Like, we've got ex-professional players on the board. Like, we're not going to be like, it's not going to be one that it's like a complete shock, I think, in terms of like where we come from. But yeah, just intriguing to see how we get there and the process that they go through and what happens over the next few days.
I said earlier, but like I can't remember who spoke about it during the week or one of the previous shows, but somebody had mentioned the fact that we're now at a stage where we're signing boys who've won the league, and now there's a marked difference. Maybe Graham Meldham actually was talking about, like the calibre of player that we're picking up and the players we are going for. We're now at a stage where we've got a team full of guys who've been there and done it. Iain Murray's honours list as a manager, and it feels really harsh to say this because, and again, I'm going to say it on record, I really like Iain Murray, and this makes it really hard. He's never won anything. He couldn't get Airdrie up and came to us, and they got up the season after.
Yeah.
And that's really harsh. There's no two ways about that. That's really harsh. But it's true though. He's not won anything at that level. He got to the Challenge Cup final and didn't win it. A cup that we'd won 2 or 3 times already. Maybe that is playing a little bit in the board's decision as well, like a lack of killer instinct maybe, or whatever. I don't know what that is. But it wouldn't surprise me now if we're at a stage where the only way we can appoint somebody is if we either appoint somebody who's got like a big name, which I still don't know if we can afford that kind of stuff, but a big name, or somebody who's already got experience of having won a league, this league. I don't know.
See, just to touch upon what you were saying there, it's like, I think that it would be, you would expect like that would be the route that we would go down, I think, just in terms of the whole dynamic of like where we signed from before. But I think it's a lot more difficult with managers in particular, like looking at who's won the championship before and who could bring in. But yeah, one big criticism that the Airdrie fans had about Iain Murray was that they that was exactly their point. Like, you read through what the Airdrie fans are saying, and it's like, yeah, sure, it's fine getting to these situations where you might go up, but he never actually got it done. And I know that it does feel, as you say, it does feel a bit brutal to say that.
It's really harsh.
Yeah. That's sort of like, it is. I think it is still a fair statement to make, but I feel like Iain Murray, he's not going to be out of work for long. I feel like he'll be back in a job relatively quickly with a club. I think that compared to where he was before he came to Airdrie, and like
the board will be hoping so. They'll be paying him until he's back in work.
That'll be true. But yeah, I think that his stock's going to be very high at the moment. A lot of clubs will probably look at that and sort of say, he could do a
next
job for us.
Dunfermline manager?
Can Dunfermline afford to actually pay anyone?
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, St Johnstone, for example, if they sacked Craig Levine, like Iain Murray would be on the interview list. Whether he gets it or not is a different story. But
Hibs might be delighted.
Like, it's your point about not winning anything's interesting. A little bit like, John McGlynn had that long run where he kept getting to cup finals and didn't actually get to manage them.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
I was just thinking about that.
It's a relatively small sample size.
It is.
You're in 4 competitions every year, but like, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of.
No, I agree.
It
I think
takes
I say
a
it was
lot
harsh.
to win a competition, and you did. And I don't know.
But there is a mentality thing. We've used it with players. We talked about, Josh Mullen might not be the Josh Mullen of 5 years ago or whatever, but he's a decent signing. He's been there. He's done it. He's crossed that line before. He knows what it takes. It's not unreasonable to say that Iain Murray doesn't know what it takes.
I know what you mean in terms, because the way I was thinking about it, just until you said that, was like, somebody comes in. It's not like they get halfway through the season and they're like, hang on a minute, this guy's never won anything. But no, I mean in terms of the mentality within the group, or no, like, how are you treating the players? How are you setting up during the week? Like, are you browbeating them? Are you letting them do their own thing and all that kind of stuff? How much leeway do you need to give them their days off versus all that? That conceivably you could have the big part of that, where having run the course before and won it, you've got a better idea. But there's so many different.
I think that's such a fine, small point, though. I mean,
I think we should probably start at least steering towards the end of this episode as we approach the 90-minute mark.
Can we do some speculation?
We can certainly do some speculation. Before we do that, Callum, anything you want to give me on yesterday, on Iain Murray's time overall, anything like that at all? By way of getting towards sort of final thoughts.
I want to talk about yesterday. I think Airdrie is the worst away day in Scotland.
Wow.
Because
have you been to Capello, Callum?
I have been to Capello, but I think Airdrie's worse.
Wow.
Airdrie, it's like, with the other stadiums, right? They have like some sort of characteristic to them. Airdrie's doesn't. It's just a shite big stadium that is never anywhere near full. They like shut off like 2 stands. The catering is the worst in the championship. I've never had a good pie there. And it's like yesterday, my one looked like it'd been served via a mechanical press, and my brother's got food poisoning off the macaroni pies.
Callum, I never went to the pie stand, but did they not still do pot noodles?
I don't know. But the thing is,
I'm going to say this now. I've been at Airdrie hungover. That 4-3 game, when we beat them 4-3, it was the day after my birthday. Actually, it was my birthday. I was so hungover. That pot noodle sorted me right out.
I think it's
very difficult to undercook a pot noodle as well.
It really is.
Iain, anything for you? Kind of, as I say, we'll do it. We can do a bit of speculation. Blair seems keen, but in terms of kind of final thoughts on let's call it an eventful 48 hours.
Yeah, just on the game, a really minor point. I don't think it affected the outcome of the game at all. I thought the park was really poor. I thought the ball stuck between players' legs. I don't know if Airdrie have got an irrigation system. If they do, they're certainly not using it. I thought it was incredibly sticky. Callum Smith got the ball stuck between his legs 4 or 5 times. Whether or not that's down to Callum Smith or whether that's down to the park is up to your own interpretation. But he certainly wasn't the only one. I just thought it made for a really poor game. Ball was holding up, like a kind of funny spin on the ball. I'm a massive proponent of plastic pitches, but I thought that yesterday's was piss poor, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that's definitely like,
maybe they should be banned.
Getting water onto the park makes a huge difference, and I think definitely into the second half it was that kind of looking at half time, kind of looking to see like, are there sprinkler heads down there somewhere?
I mean, when the ball literally can turn 90 degrees on a bounce, too dry. Sorry, it's not good enough.
I just to kind of try and counterbalance a little bit, I remain really impressed by the way Airdrie go about their business on the park.
Yeah,
and it's some of the stuff that teams, don't get credit for and not necessarily deserve credit for. I was going tonto yesterday because they kept fouling us every time we turned the ball over. Frizzell it twice in about 2 or 3 minutes. But if you're getting away with it, good. Like, well done. Keep doing it. If the referee's not going to pull you up for it, then that's good football. They stopped us getting away out the middle of the park a couple of times, just with these really easy, really cheap fouls. Getting away with it. It's little things like that add up, make a big difference. And I actually didn't think with the ball, I wasn't particularly impressed with them. Kind of unlike maybe a couple of times last season. They did not create an awful lot at all. I think a huge stroke of luck in the goal, where Lewis Gibson basically manages to dispossess the guy, and then, whether it's the park or otherwise, the ball's just stuck between their feet, and he manages to kind of get it back again. I don't know. I suppose it comes back to my overarching point. Like, before anything happened, I thought there was an overreaction to a 1-0 defeat away at Airdrie.
Yeah.
As poor as it was to watch. But obviously, there's a bigger picture.
It felt like a very different Airdrie, though. Like, because I think that was my only real concern coming home last night. Was yes, it was just a 1-0 defeat, and you're absolutely right. Like, some of the reaction last night was mental. But I think it was a very great Airdrie side. Like, even their bench and stuff, we were talking about it at half time. You're looking at our bench and you're looking at their bench, and you're thinking, by the way, when the subs start happening, we might be all right here. Like, we might come good. They don't look like they have a huge amount of depth. But, I mean, I thought they really missed Charlie Telfer in the midfield. Like, he kind of really ticks them over. Not Aaron Reid. No, I just heard that come through. Not Aaron Reid. I thought they weren't any, like, I agree with what you're saying. They were very professional in what they did, but I didn't think they were a particularly good Airdrie side. Certainly not as good as they were last year.
I'm just going to jump back in there because I actually forgot to say it. So, last point from me on the game. I disagree. I disagree with that. I thought Airdrie moved the ball really, really well. I thought they deserved to beat us. I thought they were much better with the ball, much braver with the ball, played out for the back, never went long with a single goal kick, held on to it, were brave in possession. I thought they broke at pace. That one where they kind of broke down, it was specifically with a target on our right-hand side. So they got the ball in behind and then hit the bar. It'd been a great goal. It's like 3-4 passes, and it was in such stark contrast to us. We were laboured, we were slow, we just never really got it together. I thought they were really, really slick.
That chance came from our set piece as well. One of those crap, floaty, like, tossing the ball into the box, and 2 seconds later they hit the bar.
Yeah, that was the other thing, the crossing by the end. Like, even though we were down to 10 men by the end of that game, last 10 minutes, we had 4 or 5 good opportunities to cross the ball into the box. Now, I think 3 of them felt at Ewan Murray, and that's not his job. Like, that's a problem as much as anything, when that's who's getting the opportunities. But I don't think we landed any of them between the posts, let alone getting them onto a Rovers player. And it's that kind of stuff that the other thing as well, sorry, my other kind of stray thought from yesterday, Mason Hancock, I think's become the best left back in the division.
I think he'll be away before the transfer window's closed.
In my squad.
Been a big Harry Milne fanboy for a couple of years. I think he has regressed slightly, and I think Mason Hancock's just hitting kind of new heights. Again, just really impressed, as you say, and they were targeting us down that right-hand side. And I don't think it was because they got the team sheets through and thought, oh, Ross Matthews is there, that's, we can go at them. I think they recently woke up in the morning and thought, thank God I've got Mason Hancock, we can go at anybody down that left-hand side. Scott, for you, anything from yesterday, any other kind of final thoughts?
Other than I thought it was a really pish game. No, I slightly disagree with Iain. I thought it had 0-0 written all over it from minute one. I thought,
Yeah.
first 5 minutes, I'd agree that I thought our press was so much better than it was the week before. And that was the one thing that I think Dylan Easton came out and said after the game, saying that we had the press completely wrong. So
Yeah.
I think the fact that the first 5-10 minutes we looked like we'd kind of sorted that out, and we were not all over them, but we had them pinned back for sure, because they were trying to play out like they do, but they couldn't get out their half for 10 minutes. Then they got going a bit more, and obviously they were targeting Matthews with that sort of pinged 50-yard ball over his head, and I thought we dealt with most of the first half, but there was a couple of times, obviously, Hancock got into it and put a ball into the box, but again, they never really created much. And other than them hitting the bar, I genuinely didn't think that Airdrie did that much to deserve to win the game. I just thought this game's got 0-0 written all over it. I thought, you'll take 0-0, you'll take a point, get out of there, clean sheet. Like, there's enough there to go, right, we can go next week, and another week of training, another sort of week to get things right, we'll be fine. But obviously it was a bit unlucky, the fact that it's just a death flick that's nothing that Kev could have done with a goal. It's just a death flick that's just gone into the bottom corner. I think the only thing you could say is that, was it no the same with the Hamilton one, that somebody's came off the back post for both goals? There was somebody at that post that came off and the ball's gone there. That's the only thing that you could potentially look at, and ask, why is somebody moving off that post every time? But it's, yeah, you're really looking for something at that point. But yeah, I genuinely thought it was a piss game.
Agreed.
Blair, take us into idle speculation, please. In any way that you see fit. Who do you want? Who are you seeing? What's your desires stylistically? What are you thinking?
I mean, it's you know, I had a chip at that, and I hope he's listening because he's an absolute trumpet. That RRFC fan media or whatever he is on Twitter. He's tweet last night, and I bet, like, hook, line and sinker, he's given it we need to be getting away this week, and before the end of the week I want a creative midfielder, I want a striker. And I'm like, just one creative midfielder? And what flavour of striker would you like, sir? Like, there's a wine list and we're just going to pick them off of it. And I think that's my worry with a manager position, is what I want probably doesn't exist. Certainly not within our price bracket. I want fast, free-flowing football. I want attack. I want goals. I'll take 4-3 every week, sir. Thank you very much. Like, bite your hand off for it. I would bite your hand off.
There's a guy called Iain Murray that's available.
Yeah, totally. Swashbuckling Iain Murray. Maybe that's what we need. Get him back in. New manager bounce. We'll be fine.
Okay. Scott and I are just terrified that the new guy moves away from 4-2-3-1.
Yeah.
But we've got a squad built for that, so he's got to play 4-2-3-1.
Has he though? Or has he got a squad built for 4-6-0?
Craig Levine, welcome.
Yeah, I honestly don't know, Duncan, is the thing. The names, I mean, we did the usual thing in the group chat of who's coming in. I still maintain I don't see the board appointing somebody who hasn't won something. I think if they appoint somebody completely unknown, it's a joke. It's a genuine piss take. Like, I think that's awful. So I think they have to appoint somebody who's won something. So Jack Ross is a name that springs to mind. Is an obvious one. He's won this league before. Do I want Jack Ross? Not sure. I'm back to meh territory.
Very well dressed, Jack Ross.
He is. He's quite handsome, actually. Tam Courts is the other one. That is the obvious Kelty link.
Mm-hmm.
But has he not just gone to Saudi Arabia on $100,000 a week or something? Like,
Something like that. Aye.
I'm not sure we can pay that.
Not seen his wage slip, but I believe he is working in Saudi Arabia, yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say
it's a great time to check up on their human rights record. Cody doesn't have that.
I'm going to go ahead and say that before tax, we can't afford that.
I did enjoy the speculation of people that are like, Rhys McCabe, and it's like, aye, the guy that just signed a 2-year deal in the summer.
By the way,
to be fair, Iain Murray just signed a 3-year deal.
Very true.
I'm not sure the strength of these contracts is quite what you would want it to be.
I'm not sure I want them, but how
the
funny
lady
would
really
that be?
started to sit in on the podcast.
To be fair, no, I can't see that either. I would be delighted with Rhys McCabe, and I would like.
It would be a step up for him.
Be able to claim most things are. He's a wee boy. I'd be delighted to be able to claim a long game, given I've been praising his Airdrie side repeatedly
really
on this podcast.
For me was Duncan Cameron being really nice on that podcast.
Yeah. But no, I can't see it at all. I don't see. No. I don't see the couple of places higher in the league being the kind of height of his ambition. I think he'll get a shot at a top flight job basically. Next time one comes up, effectively, if he keeps up the form he's had. Robbie, anybody in particular that you don't want? Anybody out there that you think is a legitimate target?
Aye, Dougie Emery can get to fuck straight away. We can get that one out the bat.
Yeah,
right?
agreed. I'm
gonna just be straight blunt up and just say you don't want someone that's going to be like the style of football that he brings in terms of like the directness. But yeah, like I'm looking at the Football Scotland article that got linked to me. I think it was Aaron McIntosh that sent that on. And aside from Courts and McCabe, like Kevin Thompson, like Jim Maggleton, Marvin Bartley.
Sorry, got to stop you there, Robbie.
Manager of Cliftonville in the Northern Irish Premier League.
Right, okay. So he's just lost his best striker to Airdrie. Yeah.
Marvin Bartley, who blasted players for playing too many video games. Who else we got? John Hughes.
No.
Right, can move forward.
That's plenty. I've had enough of that.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to say this now because there's a very good chance the board are going to listen to this because we know they probably have and might do. If you appoint John Hughes, I'll burn the fucking place down. I'm telling you now. I'll burn it to the ground and I'll start the fire at my season ticket seat so that everybody knows it was me.
Blair just continually posting flammable cladding articles, just continually.
I'm a chemistry teacher. I know how.
Right, Walter White, calm down. It's it's just like it's really hard, and I think it's easy for us on a podcast to sit here and judge this. And I know I say this all the time, and it's a really fucking trite point to make, but like it's just hard to see the direction that they go. Because if you look at the managers that have won it before, Gary Boer, like what's he up to nowadays? Neil Lennon's away at Romania. One interesting shout was Jack Ross, but I think that he's down in like Newcastle. I think, with their under 23s, whatever. It's a very, very hard one to see. Fans of the Terrace podcast will be probably looking at Craig Telfer and saying Andy Graham's the man for the job, but unfortunately I'm down after putting all my stock into TV Daryl Mola has been the next top property, so it's very hard. It's a really, really difficult one to see the direction we go for. It might be that we look at sort of people that are invested in the setups and the bigger clubs in the top flight. I don't know. Don't envy them having the choice, but they're the ones that have put themselves there, and intrigued to see how it goes. But yeah, just as long as it's not Dougie Emery, then I'm fine.
Yeah, it goes back to something we said, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours ago. It feels to me like there must be a wider plan because the visible market is pretty thin, to be fair. It includes people like Jim McGilton, I believe you called him there. Like there's not a surplus of available qualified, well-dressed managers. Like
Zinedine Zidane's still out of work, is he not?
Brexit, it's ruined it.
Yeah, so you don't have.
Beautiful.
It's not the market to sack a guy on a whim and go, "Okay, it's fine." You know, these 3 guys will all apply, and any one of them would be able to do it. It feels to me like there must be a plan in place. Again, to go back to the way you expect a modern, forward-thinking football club to go about its business, you sound guys out in advance. You make sure you've got at least an iron in the fire so that when you sack your manager, you're not then having to have a meeting on the Monday morning where you go, right, now what? Like, it feels like there must be a plan in place. There must be something.
I would be intrigued to see how much time they give Colin Cameron in terms of if he's picking up things in the sort of short term,
Not
like how
long.
much they actually give it, because that could be some food for thought. He's managed before with Cowden Beef, I know.
Nah, not long.
It's just, it's a really, and I think the position that we're in, but if we're going for a certain route, and the sort of expectation there is the fans, and again, you would say the same about John Potter as well. I know that there are two guys that are involved in the club and they do their jobs very, very well, but I think that John Potter's record as a manager, I think that people would probably be quite up in arms if we went down that route. If I'm just going to say what everyone's probably thinking there, I don't know what you guys would say, but
Yeah, I think a prerequisite is nobody internal. I think it has to be an external candidate.
Yeah.
Anybody internal, you're going to get more of the same of what we've already had. And whether the new guy comes in and he wants to keep, Mickey about and he wants to keep John Potter, whether like that's the structure that he want to work in, it remains to be seen. But it's got to be an external candidate for me.
Yeah, I mean Mickey's managed Berwick.
Tam Courts has got to
Cowden
be the
Beef,
front
and he was
runner, right?
sacked by them both. That Tam Courts, I think, is the obvious. He's
and I
the
think I'd be happy with that. If
that
for me,
that.
in fact, I
job,
would be happy with it.
That job in Saudi Arabia is the big kind of sticking point, but frankly, nobody knows anything about it. And he wouldn't be the first guy who's gone for a job like that, like for the money, and then realised very quickly, I'm not into this. Actually, I prefer being back at home and all that kind of stuff. And
Can we delve into the realm of fantasy for a second, Duncan, and mention your shout of that being mentioned potentially not too seriously?
The best
sheer
possible
absolute
outcome.
out there. Yes.
Yeah, well, giving Brian Graham his first shot at senior men's management.
While simultaneously taking away Partick Thistle's main focal point in attack. Like,
just think that for that
I should
alone.
add, nobody in our group chat seriously suggested that, by the way. Nobody was realistically thinking it was going to happen, but
unless it happens, in which case I called it first.
It would be really funny.
Yeah, but as I say, based on everything that's happened so far, I think the simplest scenario that makes the most sense is that Tam Courts will be the next Raith Rovers manager. That's the one that, if you take everything we know right now, that's the one that ticks the most boxes for, all right, okay, I can see how that's come about. That it doesn't mean to say for a second that that's what will happen or that's what is happening, but that's the one that I can most readily see to kind of join the dots on that. So time will tell. And I think, to be fair, we have taken up a fair bit of time.
Just very quickly though, the one thing and this is genuinely a final point because I know we're wrapping up.
You're just going to filibuster until we hit 2 hours.
No, just the fact that we've sacked a manager in the first game of the season and the Pars are jealous. Like they're literally looking at it and going, "Oh, that's genius! Oh, I wish we would have done that." Like even in our darkest moment, they're raging. Love it.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, he did lose, so I suppose it was a good thing from this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, like we're like, it was crazy to see what's happened this weekend with Raith Rovers, but they are like next level. Like
they're a fucking shambles.
We've got
Sorry, I know we're trying to wrap up, and I've just dropped.
No, to be fair, you've actually just made me think of something else, which is that it is at least, if you're going to sack a manager, the time to do it is when there's a lot to work with, and there is a lot to work with. Like this is. As far as somebody said this about 5 minutes in, and I meant to say it then. Like it is a really, really attractive job. Like if you're the kind of manager who's prepared to work in the Scottish Championship, that's the job you want.
Yeah.
Like that's the position to go in at. Where you've got a team that is proven that it can go the distance. You've got good experience. You've got a board that's not reluctant to put money down if they need to. Like, Andrew Barrowman's in the paper this week saying that the money is there to bring in at least another forward. That it should be an attractive position, and it we shouldn't end up with somebody's shite. This is where I'm going. Like we shouldn't, because why would you sack the manager if that's what's going to happen? But I have been a Raith Rovers supporter for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So
you said that this wasn't going to be a long podcast.
Yeah, I did say that. To be fair, I said that before we sacked you.
New record.
I'm basically walking out of whatever it's called.
We're 9 minutes away for 2 hours. Come on.
We're making 2 hours. We are making 2 hours. A desperate plea from Harry Davies He says, "Let me entertain the people. That podcast needs me." And I'm like, "We're wrapping up. A man that knows football, a passionate Kirkcaldy man who's got away with words. He's some boy, Harry Davies, but he's absolutely not getting on this podcast tonight."
Yeah, even if he could provide 6 additional minutes of content. Right, I'm calling it there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you have listened for this long,
Sorry.
Under normal circumstances, we would see you again on Thursday night. But these are not normal circumstances, to be frank. So who knows what will happen over the next few days? We may well have to break glass on the old emergency podcast button. Again, I suppose technically we were supposed to be doing this anyway, but yeah, it would not have been an hour and 55 minutes. But yes, I think we have wrung every last drop out of that for this particular Sunday. So thank you, everybody, for listening, as I say, and we will see you again.
Should McStay or should Dargo? Come on, Scott's dad will be disappointed.
That's us. Goodbye.